Hey, what's going on? I hope you are doing super well today. This is Taylor with Coding for Tacos, and today we are going to be learning or practicing Flexbox by building a mobile responsive nav bar. It's a simple nav bar, but I think it will be a very good introduction to Flexbox or a good practice if you've already had an introduction. And why Flexbox? Well, I've been thinking a lot about the videos I want to make, and I really see CSS and Flexbox as a very valuable skill. JavaScript is super popular right now, and people talk about it all the time, but don't sleep on CSS. With just CSS and no JavaScript, you can do a lot. You can start applying to jobs, in my opinion. You can start building out a portfolio. You can do WordPress edits for people. You can build page templates. So CSS and Flexbox are very valuable skills. Bootstrap uses Flexbox as well. So if you know Flexbox well, then using Bootstrap and learning Bootstrap will really be much easier, and you'll be able to develop those layouts very quickly. And a navbar is just a great project to learn Flexbox with because it really shows how Flexbox can be used for mobile responsive layouts. So don't worry if you don't know Flexbox or you don't know JavaScript. Everything I do, I'll try to explain very clearly, and this should be a really good introduction to Flexbox. So let's go ahead and take a look at the nav bar we'll be building, and then we will get started. Alright, so I'm really excited to finally do some coding. As you can see, this is the nav bar that we'll be building. It's really very simple. Just we have a logo here on the left and 4 nav links on the right. So this is what it looks like on desktop. Let's take a look and see what it looks like on mobile. And really that's it. So we have this toggle button and the 4 links, a little bit of JavaScript in there, just a tiny bit to show and hide the nav links there. So that is it. Let's open up our text editors and get started. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code for this project. Feel free definitely to use whatever code editor you like. I really like Visual Studio Code and I use it for almost everything. So as you can see, I have Visual Studio Code open in a folder called Flexbox Practice, which is on my desktop, and the only thing in it is this logo here. Feel free to use your own logo, or you can just add text where this would be. All of that is fine, it really doesn't matter. So let's go ahead and get our starter file set up, our starter HTML, then we'll go over some real quick basic Flexbox basics, and we'll build our navbar. So I'll add our index.html, which of course we'll need. We'll also need a style.css, and I'll go ahead and add the JavaScript file, even though we'll only have a few lines of JavaScript. If you don't know JavaScript, don't worry, you can follow along for that part. This is really all about Flexbox. Okay, so for our HTML then, I'll use an Emmet abbreviation to get some starter HTML in there. Add a title. I should also link the style sheet. Got that, that's great. And I'll add here, I will add our JavaScript. So script source. Perfect. Okay, awesome. So we have that set up, and I'll just go ahead and add an H1 here so we can see it. Okay, now because I'm using Visual Studio Code, I have the option to install this nice extension called Live Server, and here I can start it or I can right click, and this is just going to serve up any static files that I have, which is really awesome. I'd rather use Firefox this time. Great, so we should be all set up, and our style sheet is linked, so is the JavaScript. Perfect. Let's begin with some CSS here, just get what we need to start. So I want to say that we have box sizing of border box. I want by default, I want the margin to be 0, and same for the padding. Then for the body, I'll just define a font family. And sorry, Arial, let's use Helvetica this time. I don't know why, it just sounds Sounds nice. I think that's good. And let's go ahead and also add a container class with a max width of 1300 pixels, let's say, and margin 0 auto so that it's centered in the middle of the page. And now let's add a few lines of starter HTML. In fact, we want everything to be wrapped in a container, of course. For the purposes of just showing some of the very basic properties that Flexbox has, let's go ahead and I'm just going to add that image. There we go. Cool, so we have that image and I'm using a shortcut that is Shift, Alt, and the down key to duplicate that. I think 3 will be enough here for our purposes. Okay, let's take a look and see what we've got. Pretty much as to be expected. We're not using any CSS here except for the container. So, for the purposes of showing you how things are working, let's go ahead and give this a border. We'll say 2 pixels, solid, orange, red. I always add a border, and for me this is kind of like the console log in JavaScript. Normally I just say border 1 pixel solid red, and that way I can see what space the element is taking up. So here we are, we have our container with those 3 images, and I'm going to give the container a class or a property of display flex. So now Flexbox is happening. And it looks the same. Well, first, let's talk about this. In Flexbox, you always need to think of the parent, the Flex parent, and its children. Whatever is inside of that parent, or whatever is inside of this container, are the children, and whatever has display flex is the Flex parent. And the parent defines how the children are organized. By default, the flex direction is row, so we shouldn't see any changes, but I can change the flex direction to be column. So now if I take a look, whoa, these images are all 100% because we haven't given them a width, so they're just within the container. But you can see that now they're aligned, or they're arranged vertically instead of horizontally. I'll delete that so it will go back to the default flex direction row. And we also have another important one, justify content. By default, it's justify content flex start. So nothing will change. But what happens if I change it to flex end? Save that. And now they're all to the right. We can also have them in the center, or we can have them spaced evenly. It's really nice actually. You can see Visual Studio Code gives me a lot of options here. I can see I want to use space between. That's what we'll be using quite a bit for this project. And if I take away one of those logo images, you can see that space between adds the maximum space between the 2 children. Cool, well with this, let's go ahead and get started building the actual navbar. So I'll delete those 2 lines of code with the images. I will also take away display flex and justify content from our container. And actually I'll take away the border too. So we're back to the beginning. Perfect, now let's work on our HTML. Inside the container I want a nav element. And inside of that, I want a div with the class of logo wrap. So in there, I'll go ahead and add our logo. Super, so we have that. Now I'm going to add our nav links. Obviously, we want those. So I'll add an unordered list with the class of nav links. And we need our list items, so I'll give that a class of nav item. And inside of there is our actual link. I'll say this link is about, and again, I'm going to use that shortcut, Shift, Alt, and the down arrow to add a few more. Let's say products will be another link, services, there we go, services, and contact. That's a pretty normal one. Cool, well, let's take a look. We have our links, we have all of our elements. I'm going to go ahead and give some of these a border again so we can really see what's happening. So down here, or rather in our style.css, let's do that. So let's give the nav a border 2 pixels solid black. Then I will give nav links, let's give those a border, or that container a border rather, border 2 pixels solid, what should we say, red. Red is easy to see. Okay, cool, and the logo wrap too, why not? Logo wrap, and I'll say purple. That should be easy to see, solid purple. Awesome, so we're all set up now. I'm just going to go ahead and give these links actually some styles. Our unordered list, the nav links, is the UL. So we'll say list style type none to take away those bullet points. And for the links themselves, nav link, let's make sure, I did not give these a class. So here with Control D, I can highlight multiple things that have the same text there, so I can give them all a class of navlink. So now each link has the class of navlink, and I'll give that a color of orange red. Let's say that these will all be uppercase, and let's make them bold. Okay, looks pretty good. I want to take away the underline from those as well. So text decoration, none. Good. Very good. Now let's start using Flexbox. So let's take a look at the HTML. And here we have our nav, and our nav has 2 children, the logo wrap and the nav links. So we want to set display flex to our navbar. I'll go ahead and do that. Display flex. And remember, by default now, it's with flex direction row, justify content, flex start. That's what it is by default. So I want to say justify content space between. And awesome, this is good. Now I want these to be horizontal as well. So what I'm going to do, if we look at the HTML, I'm going to make this display flex as well. This is already display flex. Now I want to set another flex parent inside of that. So nav links, display flex, and cool, these are horizontally because it's flex direction row. So that's pretty good. I'm going to give each list item a margin now. And that one is called nav item, is what I called each list item. Nav item is the class. So margin, nothing on the top and bottom, and 1 rem on the sides. Scratch that. Half a rem on the sides. Great, I think that looks pretty good. And I want the nav link on hover to be black. So let's do that, hover, super. Okay, this is pretty cool, right? But I don't want them to be up there at the top, and I don't want to just add padding to push them down. I want them to be aligned in the center vertically, right here, aligned in the center of where the middle of the logo would be. So what I can do, and this is awesome, you'll see with just a couple lines of code you can do so much with Flexbox. Align items center. And I haven't saved yet. Watch what happens when I save. Perfect. Wow, that's great. So we already have the desktop version of this navbar finished. So we can go ahead and remove all of the borders that we have. I don't think we'll be needing those. Is that everything? I'm going to comment this logo wrap out because we'll need to give it some styles later on. And we're looking pretty good. We have a really simple desktop navbar here ready. But you know what? If we go smaller, you'll see that this is not responsive. In fact, if I click on that little phone icon, you can see that this is not going to work. People don't want to do this on their phones. So let's make this mobile responsive, and Flexbox makes it so easy. It's one of the reasons that Flexbox is so powerful. So we'll go ahead and add some media queries. Now what we want to say is when we get to a certain point, we want to obviously make these go vertical, so we want to change the flex direction, but we also want to stack these. I want the logo to be above the links, so we'll need to change the flex direction of the nav element as well. Let's start with that. And a very common media query is at 768 pixels. So I'll go ahead and put that in there, and when it hits that point, I want to say that the flex direction is going to be column. And exact same thing for our nav links. When we hit that point, 768 pixels, I want the nav links to also be in a column. And let's see what happens. Getting pretty close. There we go. Awesome. So the links drop down below the logo, and they also are organized vertically just how we want them. Now I'll add a little margin between the links. This would be very hard to click with the finger. So, a lot of so's today, I guess. So again, we'll add our media query here for each nav length. I'll put it, actually I'm going to put it below the hover. There we go. So again, nav link. Let's give it some margin on the top and bottom. Maybe 10 pixels on the top and bottom, 0 on the sides. But that didn't work. I actually would prefer to get, this is not working, and I'll tell you why. Because the nav link is an anchor tag, so it's display inline, and that's why the margin's not working. I actually want to add the margin to this list item. Nav item is the class, so I'll copy that, nav, change it to nav item, and that looks much better. But I think they're a little too spread out, so I'll go ahead and change this to 0.5 rem, and that should be, let's see, that should be 8 pixels instead of 10. I think that's good for now. Great. And I don't want the logo to be on the side, so I need to add a media query for that. That should be very easy. This is what we needed logo wrap for. So inside of the media query, I'll say that when it is mobile screen size, I want it to have text align center. Great. So here we have it. We have a mobile responsive navbar that looks pretty good and would work well for any static site, or a static page. But I want to have a toggle button so we can open and close these nav links on mobile. So let's go ahead and let's create that toggle button. And we'll go in here, we're going to use Flexbox for this too, and I'm going to put it between the two Flex children here. Put it right here. I'll have a div with an ID of, I'll call it mobile toggle button. And inside of that, 3 divs with the class of toggle line. Okay, and again, I'll use that shortcut to make 3 of them. And let's make those. Put a comment, mobile toggle button. And what did I call that? I think I called it mobile toggle button, or BTN. And I'll give it a width of, let's say, 30 pixels and a height of, I'll try 30 pixels too. And I'll give it a border so we can see it. Okay, that's that little thing over there. Now we need the lines. So toggle line, let's call it toggle button line. Toggle BTN line. Just a little more descriptive, I think. So I'll say border bottom, 2 pixels, solid orange red. And they're all at the top there, but if I give the parent a display flex, and then I say flex direction column, we're part of the way there. And now justify content space between. Okay, I'll take away this parent border. All right, that looks all right. And let me give it a margin of 0 auto, so it's in the center how we want it. That's okay, but it's kind of ugly. I think we need to make the bottom borders a little bit thicker there and a little less space between. So maybe the height of 20. Oh, that's pretty good. And instead of saying margin 0 auto, because this would be quite hard, I think, to click on mobile. Instead of margin 0 auto, let's put 10 pixels on the top and bottom. Not bad. Let's put a little bit more. I'm going to say 1 rem, which should be 16 pixels. Lastly, now this won't show up on mobile, but it bugs me. I want to make these black, and I want to add the cursor pointer to it. So I'll do that. I'll say cursor pointer, and I want this to be black, those lines to be black instead of orange. There we go. But obviously this isn't working yet, and that's where JavaScript will come in. So let's think about this. What we want to happen is when we click on this, we want the nav links to disappear. And I want to do that by adding and removing a class of active. So when these nav links are active, they'll be showing. When they don't have the active class, they will be hidden, or they'll have display none. So let's go ahead and set that up in the CSS. Up here at nav links, if they don't have the active class like this, I actually would like those to be, I'll just take this away for now. I want those to be display none. But when it has the class of active, so I'll add that, then I want it to be display flex with the flex direction of column. And I want those to show by default on the page load, so I'll give them that class right away. So they have nav links active, and let's make sure that's working. If I inspect, here you see we have the class of active and they're showing. That's great. If I remove that, now they're not showing. If I add active again, they're showing. So that's awesome. We just need to make that happen in JavaScript now. So remember, we need to grab or manipulate toggle button to listen for a click, and then these nav links so we can hide and show them. So here, let's write some JavaScript. If you don't know JavaScript, this is very simple, and you can just follow along with me. We need to declare 2 variables. our mobile toggle button. And we need to grab that. So document get element by ID, and it was called mobile toggle button. And for our next variable, we need to grab those nav links. I'll call them that, nav links. Document query selector nav links. Perfect, so we have our two variables. Now let's listen for the click. We need to know when a user clicks the button. So let's add that event listener, add event listener, which is a click. And when someone clicks, we want to run this function. Let's console log something. Okay, now let's just check and see if that's working. In the console, when I click this, boom, hello taco lovers. Awesome, so that's great. So we know when someone clicks. And when someone clicks, I want to toggle the active class on these nav links. So when someone clicks, nav links, class list, toggle, active. And what this is doing is, if there is the class of active already, it will remove it. If the active class isn't there, it will add it. And that should be all we need. Let's see if it's working. Cool. And if I inspect so we can actually look here, pay attention to this. When I click it, active is removed, then the active class is added. Wow, so that's it. So we now have a mobile responsive navbar. And just for a bonus, I guess, let's add a little CSS animation so that these nav links fade in when someone opens the nav links. So I'll go ahead and Google it, CSS Animation. And this should be enough. This animation is going to be very, very basic. And I'll copy this. You can see they have a great example there. And in my CSS, I always put animations at the bottom. I'm not sure why. I've just always done it that way. Now, instead of saying from and to, I like to think of it this way, 0% and 100%. So this is what things will look like at 0 when the animation is just starting. This is what they'll look like when it finishes. And of course, we could put 50% if we wanted in there. We could have several different stages. When it's at 0%, I want the opacity to be 0. When it's at 100%, I want the opacity to be 1. And I'm going to call this animation fade in. Let's add that to our nav links active. I want these to have that animation. And Visual Studio Code shows us all the different properties we can add to animation. So I'll just use that as a reference, and I'll say animation, the name, fade in. I want it to fade in over, well, half a second, let's say. No delay or anything like that, but I want to say forwards. Actually, I'll say ease out for the timing function. And forwards so that it stays at this 100% state, or opacity of 1. And that should do it. Let's see if that worked. And you can see they're fading in. If I make it longer, like let's say 5 seconds, close, and they fade in over 5 seconds. So I'll go ahead and just change that back. I'm going to just put it to 200 milliseconds. It will be pretty quick. And that's it. So you can see, this took a little longer than I thought, but if we look at our code here, I have some extra spaces and stuff, and we haven't even hit 100 lines of CSS, and we have a total of 5 or 6 lines, I guess, of JavaScript. So you can see that Flexbox is really powerful. In just a small amount of time with a few lines of code, we've created a mobile responsive navbar that I think looks just fine and would work well for static pages. If you're still here with me, thank you so much for following along with this. I hope it was helpful. I hope you see just how powerful Flexbox can be, just how useful it is. I love it. I use it all the time when companies or people hire me to make alignment changes or fixes to old websites. It's really nice because with just a few lines of Flexbox, I can generally fix those alignment problems. So let me know what you thought. This was kind of a simple tutorial, but if you'd like me to build anything else, please let me know in the comments. I love to hear your feedback, so leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought, and I hope to see you next time. Take care. Thanks.